Snow fell thick and heavy over Kigoma that night, covering every roof and road in white silence. Amara pulled her scarf tighter as she walked home from the hospital, tired but content after a long day of helping others. She had always believed her life with Jonas, her handsome husband, was good enough. He could be harsh, yes, but she had learned to smile through it. When she reached the house, her fingers numb from the cold, she knocked on the door, expecting warmth and light to greet her. Instead, she saw Jonas and his two sisters inside, staring at her through the window. Their faces twisted into cruel smiles. "You wanted to act like a saint. Then freeze with your kindness," Jonas said, his voice cutting through the glass. He turned the lock with a loud click. For a moment, Amara stood frozen, too shocked to feel the cold. Snowflakes stuck to her lashes, her breath fogged against the window, and the laughter from inside echoed like a nightmare. She knocked again, softly at first, then harder, but no one moved. The cold crept into her bones, and she felt something inside her shatter, not from the icy air, but from the betrayal. She had given this man her trust, her years, her love. And now, left outside in the storm, she understood a truth she could never unlearn. Whatever warmth she once felt for Jonas had died in that moment, replaced by something sharp, quiet, and cold as the snow itself. The snowstorm raged harder as Amara walked away from the house that had once felt like home. The wind slapped against her face, and her thin coat did little to keep her warm. Her phone had died hours ago, leaving her alone with the sound of the storm and her own shivering breaths. Every step felt heavier than the last, her boots sinking deep into the snow. The night sky above was dark and endless, and the world around her was nothing but white and cold. She could barely see the road ahead, but she kept walking. Going back wasn't an option. Not anymore. Her mind spun with memories of the years she had spent trying to please Jonas. The cruel words, the mocking laughs, the fake smiles in front of others, all of it came rushing back like waves of ice. She remembered how he would twist her kindness into weakness, how his sisters would whisper and laugh behind her back, how she had slowly forgotten what it felt like to be seen, to be respected, to be loved. For so long, she had thought endurance was strength. But now, as snow stung her face and her body trembled from exhaustion, she realized true strength was walking away, even when it hurt. Tears filled her eyes but froze before they could fall. Somewhere inside her, anger began to burn, not wild, but steady and clear. She made herself a promise as she trudged through the snow, "They will never laugh at me again." She didn't know how, or when, but she knew she would rise from this night stronger than ever. Her legs finally gave out, and she sank to her knees on the side of the road. Her vision blurred, and her hands were too cold to move. The world spun, and for a second, she thought that maybe this was how it would end, alone, frozen, forgotten. But then, through the roar of the wind, she heard the distant hum of an engine. Headlights broke through the snow, growing brighter as a large truck came into view. The driver stopped, jumped out, and ran toward her. "Hey! Are you all right?" he shouted over the wind. His voice was warm, full of concern. Amara could barely speak, but she managed a weak nod. The man, Cato, as he later introduced himself, wrapped his heavy coat around her shoulders and helped her into the truck. Inside, the heater blasted warm air, and for the first time in hours, she felt her fingers again. Cato didn't ask too many questions. He just offered her a thermos of hot tea and said softly, "You're safe now." Amara looked at him, her lips trembling, and whispered, "Thank you." That moment stayed with her. After years of cruelty, a stranger's kindness felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. As the truck rolled toward safety, she closed her eyes and made another silent promise. One day, when she stood on her own again, she would repay that kindness, and she would never let the cold win again. The world felt quiet when Amara woke up. The last thing she remembered was the snow, the pain in her hands, and Cato's voice calling her name. Now she was lying in a small, warm room. The air smelled like medicine and coffee. A soft blanket covered her, and her body felt heavy, like she had been asleep for years. When a nurse came in and smiled, Amara's first question came out as a whisper, "Where am I?" The nurse told her she was safe, that a man named Cato had brought her to the emergency shelter just in time. Her body had been freezing, her heartbeat slowing, but she had survived. 2 days had passed. The local police had even started searching for her after Jonas reported her missing. The thought made her laugh bitterly. Missing? He was the one who locked her out. But Amara didn't say anything. She didn't ask to see him or call anyone. For the first time in years, she felt no urge to explain herself. She just wanted peace. When she left the shelter, Cato offered to help her find work. He told her about a logistics company that handled shipping and transport around the region. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work. Amara accepted, grateful for the chance to stand on her own feet again. At first, the job was hard, long hours, little pay, and heavy paperwork, but she didn't complain. Every night she stayed late, learning how the company operated, how routes were managed, how contracts were written. She paid attention to everything. Then one day, while sorting through files, she froze. The name Jonas M. appeared on a shipping manifest. It was her husband. Or rather, the man who used to be her husband in every way that mattered. She discovered that Jonas' business relied heavily on the same logistics network she was now part of. He was still bragging online about his success, posting photos of his new deals, while she quietly handled the very shipments that kept his empire alive. Something shifted inside her. She didn't feel hate, just clarity. Life had given her a second chance, and she would use it wisely. She started learning faster, volunteering for more responsibility, earning the trust of her managers. Within months, she was promoted. She built a reputation as reliable, sharp, and calm under pressure. Behind that calmness, however, was quiet strategy. She began tracing Jonas' routes, studying his partners, and noticing small irregularities in his contracts. It was like watching the threads of a web she now had the power to untangle. Each evening, as she walked home through the cold air, she thought about how far she'd come from that night in the snow. She had been broken once, but not destroyed. Now, she was rebuilding herself piece by piece, stronger and smarter than before. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the day would come when Jonas would realize what a mistake it was to lock her out in the cold, because the woman who froze outside his door was gone, and someone far stronger had taken her place. The months rolled by, and Amara's life slowly took on a rhythm of quiet purpose. She no longer lived day to day just to survive, now she was planning, learning, and building something bigger. Every morning she arrived at work early, her calm smile hiding the sharp focus in her eyes. Her co-workers respected her, her bosses trusted her, and soon people began to see her as someone who could get things done. What they didn't know was that behind her calm nature, Amara was carefully weaving a plan. She wasn't just working to earn a paycheck, she was preparing to take back everything Jonas had stolen from her, and more. Through her position at the logistics company, she met small business owners who had once worked with Jonas. Many of them told stories of how he had cheated them, crushed their contracts, or forced them into bankruptcy. Amara listened quietly, never revealing who she really was. Instead, she offered advice, connections, and small bits of help. Over time, those small businesses started to grow again, with her quiet support behind the scenes. Some of them even partnered with her on new ventures. Piece by piece, Amara began to build a network of her own, one built on loyalty and trust, not greed and fear. One night, while reviewing company files, Amara found something that made her heart race. Hidden within several documents were copies of shipping invoices and payment transfers connected to Jonas' business. The numbers didn't add up. There were forged signatures, fake client names, and hidden bank accounts overseas. It was the kind of evidence that could destroy him completely. Amara saved every file, every email, every name. She worked late into the night, gathering proof quietly, carefully, never rushing. Meanwhile, Jonas continued to brag online, posting photos of luxury vacations, expensive dinners, and fake smiles beside his sisters. He called himself a self-made success story, and his followers praised him. But Amara watched from a distance, unbothered. His confidence only made her more patient. She knew that the louder he bragged, the harder his fall would be. Her allies grew stronger. The businesses Jonas had ruined were now thriving again under her guidance. Some of his old partners started leaving him, drawn to Amara's steady leadership and quiet strength. She never had to threaten anyone or speak of revenge. Her actions spoke for her. In just 1 year, she had built the foundation for something powerful, and Jonas had no idea who was behind it. Sometimes, late at night, Amara would stand by her apartment window, watching the snow fall over the city lights. The cold didn't bother her anymore. In fact, it reminded her of who she had become. The woman Jonas had mocked and left to freeze was gone forever. What remained was someone sharper, colder, and infinitely stronger. She no longer feared the storm, because now, she was the storm, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. 1 year to the day after the night she almost froze to death, Amara returned to Kigoma. The town was wrapped again in white snow, the streets quiet and clean, just like that night, but everything was different now. This time, she wasn't the woman begging to be let inside. She was the one who owned her silence, her strength, and her future. As her sleek black SUV rolled through the snow-covered streets, heads turned. No one recognized her right away. She looked different, stronger, confident, with a calm that came from surviving the kind of pain most people couldn't imagine. When she stopped in front of the same house where she'd once stood shivering, her heart didn't race. She felt no fear, no anger, only a steady calm. Inside, the warm glow of lights and the sound of laughter spilled through the windows. Jonas was hosting a family reunion, surrounded by people who used to look down on her. He was bragging loudly, telling stories about his perfect life, his smart business moves, and how he had built everything with his own hands. Everyone cheered, not knowing that the very foundation of his empire was crumbling, piece by piece, under Amara's quiet hand. When the front door opened and she stepped out of her car, the laughter stopped. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Jonas froze mid-sentence, his smile fading as he saw her standing there, the snow glimmering behind her like a ghost from his past. "Amara," he said, his voice trembling. He looked pale, almost as white as the snow outside. She took a slow step forward, her heels crunching on the icy ground. She was wearing a simple black coat, her hair tied neatly back, and her eyes locked on his. Her voice was soft but carried through the room like a blade of ice. "You didn't expect me to thaw out, did you?" The guests exchanged confused glances. Jonas tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. You shouldn't be here," he stammered. Amara tilted her head slightly, a small smile on her lips. "Oh, I should be," she said. "I came to see how warm it feels inside these walls." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that made every person in the room uncomfortable without knowing why. Jonas's sisters whispered to each other, clearly uneasy. They had all helped him that night a year ago, laughing as Amara froze outside. Now, they couldn't meet her eyes. Amara walked past them, calm and steady, as if she owned the place. In a way, she did, because everything that mattered was now under her control. The companies Jonas depended on, the contracts that kept his business alive, even his so-called allies, they all now answered to her. Standing in the same spot where her breath had once fogged against the glass, Amara looked around the room and smiled faintly. The cold had once been her punishment. Now, it was her power. The storm had returned to Kigoma, but this time, it had her name on it. That evening, the air inside the house was thick with tension. Jonas tried to keep smiling, pretending everything was normal, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Amara sat calmly on the couch, her leather briefcase beside her. The same living room that had once been filled with their laughter now felt cold and silent. Jonah's sisters whispered nervously to each other, sensing something was coming but not knowing what. His business partners looked confused, unsure why she was there or why Jonas looked so uneasy. Amara looked around slowly, her calm eyes meeting each of theirs. Then, in a steady voice, she said, "Let's all sit. I have something important to show you." Jonas forced a laugh, trying to sound casual. "What is this, Amara? Some kind of joke?" She smiled faintly. "No, Jonas. The jokes ended a year ago." She opened the briefcase and began laying papers on the coffee table, one stack after another. "These are your bank statements," she said softly, "and these are the forged contracts you signed under fake names. Here are your offshore accounts, where you've been hiding money from your partners and the government." The room went dead silent. Jonas' color drained from his face. His sisters gasped, and one of them whispered, "This can't be real." But it was. Every document was clear, every signature matched, and every lie Jonas had built was now exposed. Jonas lunged forward, trying to grab the papers, but Amara didn't flinch. "Careful," she said calmly. "There are copies with the authorities. And a few journalists waiting outside." His business partner's eyes widened. One of them stood up, muttering, "You dragged us into this mess." Another man pulled out his phone and started calling his lawyer right there in the room. Jonas' voice broke into a shout. "You think you can destroy me, Amara? After everything I gave you?" She met his eyes without blinking. "You didn't give me anything," she said quietly. "You tried to take everything from me. You left me in the snow, remember? Tonight, I'm just returning the cold." The room exploded into chaos. His sisters screamed at him, his partners turned on him, and the neighbors outside whispered as reporters began gathering on the porch, cameras flashing through the windows. Amara stayed seated, calm and composed, watching the storm she had built unfold. Jonas begged, threatened, and even cried, but she said nothing more. Her silence was louder than any words could ever be. When the media entered, Amara stood, closed her briefcase, and walked to the door. "You should answer their questions, Jonas," she said softly. "They've been waiting." Then she stepped outside into the cold night air. Snow was falling again, just like that night a year ago. But this time, she didn't feel it bite. She lifted her face to the sky and smiled, knowing the storm that once destroyed her was now destroying the man who caused it. The cold had finally come full circle. By the next morning, news of Jonas's downfall had spread across Kigoma like wildfire. His face was on every local news channel, every social media feed, every whisper in the marketplace. The empire he had bragged about, the one he had built on lies and greed, had collapsed overnight. Authorities froze his accounts, seized his properties, and opened a full investigation into his crimes. His business partners turned their backs on him, denying they ever knew about his schemes. The same people who once toasted him at parties now avoided his calls. Jonas, the man who once thought he was untouchable, was suddenly alone. Amara returned to the house that morning, not out of pity but to end what she had started. When she stepped inside, she found chaos. Papers were scattered across the floor, phones were ringing non-stop, and Jonas' sisters were crying. Jonas sat slumped in a chair, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face pale and hollow. The arrogance that once filled his voice was gone. He looked up when he saw her, but no words came out. His sisters rushed to her, falling at her feet, begging for forgiveness. "Please, Amara," one cried. "We didn't mean for it to go that far. We were just angry. Please don't destroy us." Amara didn't say a word. She simply looked at them, these same people who had laughed while she froze outside in the snow. The same ones who mocked her kindness. Now they were trembling, desperate, lost. She felt no joy in their pain, only a deep, calm understanding of how far she had come. She walked past them, her heels clicking softly on the floor, until she reached the large window at the front of the house. It was the same one she had stood outside of that night, her breath fogging the glass while Jonas locked her out. The snow was falling again outside, soft and slow, covering the town in white. She looked through the glass, her reflection faintly visible, and for a moment, she saw her past self, the woman shivering in the cold, desperate and broken. Then she blinked, and that image was gone. Without turning around, she spoke in a low, calm voice. "How cold is it on your side now?" No one answered. The room stayed silent except for the faint ticking of a clock and the sound of someone quietly crying. Amara turned away from the window, picked up her coat, and walked toward the door. She didn't look back, didn't gloat, didn't say another word. She had already won, not by shouting or seeking revenge, but by surviving, by rebuilding, by becoming stronger than the cold that once tried to break her. As she stepped outside, the icy wind brushed against her face, but it no longer felt cruel. It felt clean, like freedom. Jonas had his winter now, the same cold emptiness he once wished upon her. And for Amara, that was enough. Years passed, and Kigoma slowly forgot the name Jonas. But everyone remembered Amara. She had built something far greater than revenge, a foundation that helped women escape abuse and rebuild their lives. People from nearby towns came to her center for safety, work, and hope. Amara gave them what she once needed most, a second chance. Her kindness became her strength, and her calm presence inspired others to find courage in their pain. Her story spread quietly at first, then everywhere. Reporters called her the woman who walked through snow, a name that stayed with her for life. But Amara never bragged about her past or the empire she helped take down. She never mentioned Jonas' name again. To her, that chapter had ended the moment she stepped out of that cold house and never looked back. Every winter, when the first snow began to fall, people in Kigoma would lower their voices and whisper, "Don't mock the cold, it remembers." Parents told their children about the woman who once stood outside in a storm and came back stronger than the ice itself. Amara had become a legend, but she still lived simply, humbly, with quiet grace. Sometimes, late in the evening, she would stand by her office window and watch the snowflakes drift down, soft and peaceful. The world outside looked just like the night her story began, but this time, the cold didn't hurt. She smiled, not because she had defeated anyone, but because she had found warmth inside herself. The storm that once tried to destroy her had shaped her instead. And as the snow covered the town once more, Amara whispered to herself, "The cold remembers, but so do I."